Morning, everybody. Just bear with me while I queue up the presentation.
Peter, come take a look at this.
Mr. Daniels.
Mr. Daniels.
Look at this. What's this?
The numbers, they keep getting bigger and bigger.
The clicks are off the charts.
Yeah.
Yoshi, it's Walter. We're back.
Yes, sir! Ay! Motto, tracking! More shifting, more shifting!
I need more trees. More trees? I'll get you more trees.
Hey, take a look at Woodpole.
Everything you got on Woodpole right now.
Wow, he really loves that thing.
So I heard a couple of chuckles, so thank you. There was a genuine reason for playing that rather than just trying to break the ice somewhat. I think the idea here of my presentation is around how marketing has changed so dramatically over the last few years, and how increasingly it's difficult to understand the performance of your marketing initiatives and how to really kind of optimize those initiatives. I'm going to start with a really, hopefully, non-contentious statement, which is the world is changing. As consumers, we're increasingly engaging with brands on a variety of different devices, increasingly from a very young age, as the video showed us. There are a few buzzwords, and I'm going to apologize for that in advance in my presentation. I'll get those out of the way fairly early. The Internet of Things, what does that actually mean? What does it mean for us as a brand in terms of opportunities to engage with customers? How do we use this in our marketing initiatives? We're certainly not suggesting that you all need a team within your marketing department which is dedicated to wearables right now, but certainly there's an opportunity there to engage with customers, to engage with prospects through the devices that they're increasingly going to be carrying with them. And as we'll see, what we're increasingly seeing is that a lot of the interactions that we have as a brand with customers are moving into the digital space. So what that leads to is lots of different buzzwords, lots of different terms, and lots of different things that we as marketers need to get our heads around. Certainly, in the introduction, I've been working with Adobe for nearly 8.5 to 9 years now. And when I started, it was all about web analytics and purely about the data. And increasingly, the people that I'm talking to and engaging with are now being charged with things like content and experience management and advertising. And these are all things that, even if they're not directly under your control, they're things that you need to have an understanding of so that you can interface with the other people in your team, interface with the agencies that you're working with. So what that really kind of boils down to for us is that we need to become a new marketer in a lot of cases. We need to understand these disciplines, and we increasingly need to move towards the data side of the discipline. We need to understand what the data is telling us. We've run some research with marketers that we talk to. This is a global piece of research. And I think when I tell you that the title of the end report was Digital Distress, you'll understand sort of the sentiment that we were hearing when we got the responses back. More than 75% of marketers that we surveyed, and this is from a very broad range of organizations and experience, felt that marketing had changed more in the last 2 years than it had in the entire 50 years before that. And that leads to a lot of challenges. That leads to digital distress, because marketers are increasingly understanding that they need a digital strategy, but they're not sure that they've necessarily got all of the tools and skills that they need to carry out that strategy. One of the other things that we hear when we work with organizations, and this is a quote from a gentleman from First Direct, the financial services organization, at one of our events, is that the blindingly obvious is sometimes only visible to customers. Now, I see a couple of smiles in the room. I think this probably rings true. My observation on this is that sometimes, as a marketer, we tend to forget that we're also a consumer when we walk through the door of the office. And what we're finding is that the consumer is increasingly dictating how, where, and when they choose to engage with the brand. And they expect relevancy wherever they choose to engage. So if there's a new social network or a new social platform, increasingly we're being tasked as marketers and as brands to actually make sure that we have some kind of presence on there, and not just a page that's that's never updated, but some kind of actually managed presence. The challenge that we have, though, as a brand is that the consumer only sees your brand in most cases, but as a marketer, we've got a variety of different things that we need to control. So, when we produce this slide, there are only kind of 4 screens that we need to talk about. It's likely that we'll see more different types of device and more screens that we need to control the experience on. And then you multiply that by the different channels that you can use to engage people on those different screens. And then you multiply that by the different sources of trust, so paid, owned, and earned media. You need to control the experience and the way that you engage with the consumer on each of these different types of media. And what that leads to is the fact that increasingly no 2 customer journeys, no 2 sets of interactions that you as a brand have with the customer are the same. And if you get one of those wrong, then it leads to a bad impact, it leads to a detrimental impact on your brand. And Forrester have indicated that inconsistent experience definitely does undermine brand trust. Because I think the idea is that if you can't get right the simple or at least the perception to the consumer, if you can't get right the digital experience, how can they expect you to get right the much more complex thing that you're doing if you're in travel? How can they expect you to get them from A to B? How can they expect you to deliver a product to their door in the timely fashion that they're expecting? So all of these things lead to this digital distress, and I think I've touched on this, but marketers who think that marketers think that their company won't succeed, and 66% of marketers felt this if they didn't have a digital strategy. And as I alluded to, 48% of digital marketers felt, or rather only 48% of digital marketers felt highly proficient in digital marketing. So it's a slightly negative tone to start off with, and what I want to do now is to move on to how, some of the ways that we feel that you can ease this digital distress. And I've got 2 or 3 different areas that I'd like to go into and give you some examples of organizations who are using digital marketing technology to really kind of cut themselves away from other people in their sector and to provide real kind of competitive advantage. So these things work at the organizational level, but also at the individual level. And these 3 things that I've got today are: be a data guru, always be testing, and go digital. Go digital everywhere because your customers are. Just as I said, the customer is dictating how, where, and when they engage with you. So, be a data guru. Well, this means really understanding what metrics are important for you and your business. What are the things that you really need to actually measure, monitor, and understand, and ultimately move the needle on. And I said there were some buzzwords in this presentation, so I'm going to get it out in big text right now. Big data. What does that mean for you as an organization? This has been indicated as kind of one of the most confusing buzzwords or terms of the last few years. I don't think we really need to focus on the size of the data. It's much more about using the right data that you have. Lots of companies feel challenged by the idea that they need to incorporate every different data set that they have within the organization, from all of their legacy systems, all of their CRM systems, all of their points of sale, if they've got points of presence. The challenge is that often when you try and integrate all of those different data sets together, you actually lose sight of the questions that you were trying to ask of the data in the first place. So from an Adobe perspective, we really see this as being the right data and big data for marketers. And I think the point here is that you can lose sight of the question, and it becomes very overwhelming very quickly if you don't truly understand what you're trying to measure and what metrics you're looking to have an influence over. In the blurb, I'm not sure if any of you have read the actual blurb for the speech, but I talk about the fact that I'm going to talk about a few data points that we have uncovered as Adobe. So we are monitoring trillions of sort of transactions, and this is people looking at pages on the web, people looking at screens in apps, people running A/B tests and responding. And this data, this big data effectively, gives us the ability to run predictive analysis and look at trends within different sectors, within different verticals, and even at the country level to say, how is mobile performing in the UK versus various other countries in Europe. The first point is around the predictions that we can make based on conversion rates in particular verticals. And what we've seen is, with a very high degree of accuracy, we were able to predict that spend in the travel sector was up 15% year on year compared to last year. So here's one example of where we can use big data to not only look back and see what has happened in a particular area and enable a brand to do that, but how we can also use that data to increasingly predict where money will be spent and how people will engage with us. I've got a couple of videos that I'm going to show as we go through, and I'd just like to show you a quick video of a travel organisation and how they're using data to effectively really take control of the bottom line.
I'm Adam Barnes. I'm the web analyst for Welling Airlines. You've got to fill a plane. You've got 180 seats on most of our planes. You've got to fill it as best as you can with a maximum amount of revenue per seat. A combination of data that comes from our website and with other data that we use within the company. It's a key part of what goes on every day of Welling. Adobe Analytics allows us to analyse hundreds and hundreds of visits every hour and take better decisions, informed decisions on campaigns, on parts of our website that we change, on important parts of our purchase process. So it's an absolutely key part of what we do. Last August we released our new website. That was an important time for us because we needed to know what that change in the website brought to us. Where it really was important is informing certain key decisions on what we're doing in the design process. We're looking to reduce wasted spend, but at the same time increase the return that we're getting on that spend. That's why we've decided to take Adobe Target to be able to put in place on-site tests to validate what really is the right solution. We now know, after various years of using Adobe Analytics, how our website works and all of the things that go on our website. But the next step is to know how we can take that information and make better informed decisions to increase revenue and reduce costs. Both the Media Optimizer and the Adobe Target product help us mature our business in that way.
So I don't think you can really say it kind of in any more of or any less of a no-nonsense way, in that you've got to fill a plane. In travel, you've got a perishable inventory. Every plane needs to be as full as it possibly can. Using the data to predict travel patterns and to look at how people are actually booking flights is a real key way that they can make sure that they fill as many of those planes as possible. And Adam was also talking there about moving into this idea of testing, and that's the second point here, which is, you know, one of these points around moving away from digital distress. Always be testing. So if you understood what metrics are important to your business and how to track those metrics, then you want to start moving into the idea of optimizing and trying to enhance those or improve those metrics. And these will be key things like conversion rate or sign-ups or subscriptions, whatever these goals are that you have for your digital presence. One of the challenges that we often find is that the hippo, the highest paid person in the room, has a lot of control over what the experience actually is, or what campaign gets run on that high value part of the site. The idea behind testing is that you can use the data that's being collected from your customers and from your prospects to actually inform in a much more intelligent way the way in which you present that, your products and services, and the way in which you present your message to people. Another point from the Adobe Digital Index, looking at conversion rates, and I will make these slides available, and I'll also, in the slide deck that goes out, provide links to all of this research, because it is all available for you to consume at your leisure, should you wish to do so, after the event. But looking at conversion rates, so one of the other studies that we run is we look at organizations within different verticals or sectors, and we look at how those who are the most highly performant in that sector, how much better they are than the kind of the general mass and just the guys who are just kind of getting by. And what we've seen is that in travel, the gap between the best of the best, those people with the highest conversion rates in this case, is increasing. And that in retail, they have a nearly 100% better conversion rate than those people who are just the sort of making up the en masse organizations within that sector. So again, here, those organizations who are doing optimization, who are testing and making sure that their conversion rates are as high as possible and that their conversion processes are as frictionless as possible, are the ones who will succeed because of that competitive advantage. And the point really is that testing really uncovers exactly what is the most or what is the best message or way of demonstrating your products or services, because the response to the hippo should be, your opinion, while interesting, is irrelevant. It's all about what the data is going to tell you. I've got an example from RBS now, just talking about how they look at the data to segment their audiences and then to actually optimize within those segments.
The data is king. We're way past the point where you design for segments that don't exist. Personas are dead. It's about identifiable segments that you can quantify. You can see how many people are in them. You can see how many interact on a daily basis. If you can't measure it, you don't do it. We're fully deployed with Site Catalyst as our analytics provision across the digital platforms. We use that in association with Adobe Target to provide personalization experiences across the site. And this sits on top of Adobe Experience Manager CQ platform. We found that when we targeted content to these customers when they returned, and when we put it on the homepage, almost like the last time you were here, or you saw you were interested in this, so we're moving it a bit up the site. We found that people were 70 to 80% more likely to then engage and adopt that product, whatever it was. We're looking for Experience Manager to give the flexibility and the agile working to the team that need to operate it. The journey that people will experience looking at it on fixed web needs to look different from tablet. It needs to look different for different segments of customers. You'll have 10, possibly 20 different types of journeys that will look and be significantly different. So once this has been understood and established by analytics, then it needs to be delivered by a very capable platform. And this is the role that we see Adobe Experience Manager performing. Businesses now made such a quantum shift into understanding the data and being able to action it. If this was removed, I mean, it really would be back to the dark ages.
So I included that example because I think there's a lot of talk at the moment, a lot of focus within organizations on the idea of a single view of the customer and trying to bring together simply every data set that is available within the organization. Now, while that's often a very worthy pursuit, what we often hear is that it becomes a challenge, and these projects take a long time to actually come to fruition. The point behind that video is that Giles is there talking about, by coming up with some clever segments within your audience, not trying to talk necessarily down to the individual level, you're able to see some very big gains, 70 to 80% better engagement with the content that you put out there. So you don't always have to try and kind of boil the ocean first off when you're getting yourself into the testing and optimization. So our third point is around going digital. There is increasingly experiences are becoming digitized. We can now use our phone to book a taxi, use our phone to control the atmosphere in our homes, and there are some more sort of closer to home examples where things like print are being digitized. If you have content that you're putting out there, it's increasingly easy to get that out there in a digital way, but also in an engaging digital way. And this all comes down really to the idea that increasingly mobile is the point where we can engage as a brand directly with an individual. Again, coming back to our Adobe Digital Index and some of the research that we run, we recently ran a study where we were able to look at interactions, or rather the ways in which consumers interacted with mobile websites, smartphone apps, and tablet apps. So because we're capturing the interactions that consumers have with these different devices and different experiences, for 600 brands, we're able to look at, over a given period of time, how does a consumer engage with each of these different touch points? Do they, in fact, only engage on one of those types of touch point? Are they only a smartphone app user? Is there a need to have a tablet app? Some fairly, in some cases, some fairly obvious findings from these things. So, tablets, time spent in an app session on a tablet was 4 times longer than the web. We probably expect that. If you actually look at how people engage, it's often more of a lean back experience with a tablet where you may be looking at 2 screens simultaneously. But the smartphone app, we also saw time spent within the app was much higher than the web. The point that I also wanted to make, the stats aren't on this slide, is that during the same period of time, although we were seeing people engage with the app experience for each of these brands, they were also having sessions with the mobile website. So where they may have had something like 9 sessions in the tablet app experience, they were also looking at the mobile website of the same brand. And the point here is that we need to make sure that we keep control of the experience on each of these different channels and different types of device. It's very easy to kind of lose sight of what you're trying to do and what the use case might be for the customer and put all of your investment maybe into an app. We are seeing increasingly that when the iPhone first came out, when iOS was first released, there were a lot of organizations who rushed to create an iOS app without really knowing why they needed to have that. That kind of died away over time, but now there is, because of the increased and enhanced experience that you can provide to an individual on an app, we're seeing a big rise again in the amount of brands who are producing app-specific experiences. One other side of this is that UK, in our recent study, leads the way, and actually this is a little bit blurry, so I apologise, but essentially United Kingdom here is at the top with share of mobile visits. Mobile representing, in this case, both tablet and smartphone devices. So as marketers, we should probably recognise that if we have business that's specifically in the UK, then increasingly our consumers are trying to engage with us on these different types of device. And this is one way that we can use the data to try and understand how we should be controlling our marketing spend, where we should be investing our money in terms of experiences. A couple of examples of how you can really optimize the experience and optimize your investment in mobile. A lot of talk again about things like responsive and adaptive web design. Just a nice example from Audi, where the experience, the responsive web design experience, really changes depending on the type of device that you're using to access it and what your likely engagement is going to be. Again, some fairly obvious learnings here, but if you're out and about and you're engaging on the mobile web, you're much more likely to have a need around the geo services and where maybe the dealer is or where the service center is. So putting that front and center is much more important than putting a brand experience in front of the individual. I've talked about testing already. I would ask for a show of hands, but I'm hoping that a lot of you in the audience are already doing some kind of A/B testing on your desktop experiences at least. What's not so common is to actually test within the app experience itself. But the technology is there to enable you to do things like test 2 versions of a message inside an app without having to resubmit that app to the App Store, to Google Play, every time you've made a change or found some results. Quick example from Ancestry, the genealogy site, where you are basically paying a subscription to the organization to keep tabs on and do research on your family tree. And what they found was that they were looking to try and increase the amount of revenue that they were generating from their sign-up processes. And they had an app on the Play Store, on Google Android devices. And if any of you have apps out there that have subscriptions, you'll know that the app stores are quite keen to take a large percentage of the revenue that you generate from subscriptions using their processes. So Ancestry wanted to test whether, if they had their own sign-up process, they put their own version of a sign-up process into the app, could that drive more revenue for them than simply using the Google Play experience? The idea being that the Google Play experience, the subscription service that's built into Google Play, is much more frictionless than putting a web sign-up form in front of someone. So they used the Adobe technology in this case to do a split test, and 50% of people who went to sign up for the subscription service were given the standard Google Play sign-up process, and 50% were given a HTML form-based process that Ancestry were controlling. And what they found was that they got something like 50% less sign-ups by the HTML version of the form, but actually people were more likely to sign up for the top level of subscription. So they generated 50% more revenue when they could actually take control of the HTML sign-up process. They were able to do all of that without having to re-release the app, put different versions of the app, or even do kind of user experience testing in a lab before putting the app actually out there onto the store. So the point here is that the testing and optimization capabilities that we are starting to become familiar with in desktop web are also available for us in the mobile experience as well. I've got another customer example as well in this section, because one of the key challenges that we see is actually getting that experience into the digital realm. And one way that you can do that, if you're producing content, certainly if you're in media and entertainment, or increasingly organizations are being asked to produce or charged with producing much richer content in order to engage customers and prospects, is through digital publishing. And I've got an example of a business that has moved itself entirely from print into the digital space using the digital publishing technology.
We started with Loop in 2005, and the idea behind that was that we could go direct through to the marketplace by going direct through the letterbox with a newspaper-based publication. And then we moved on to the business aviation marketplace, and we launched P1 in late 2007. And in 2008, the recession bit, and our globalization plans for the whole publishing model that we had were really curtailed and put on hold. In 2010, Steve Jobs had the foresight and the brilliance to launch the iPad, and as soon as we saw that, we knew that that was going to be the answers to all of our needs and become the holy grail for us as a way of reaching a global market. Our speed to market is very important to us, and it enables us to stay in front of the competition. And by using Adobe Digital Publishing Suite and all of the techniques to be able to produce a very enhanced publication with lots and lots of different layers and lots of interactivity, we were able to really stay ahead of them. And I think that if it hadn't have been for that, we wouldn't be around today.
So the point there is that the digital experience that they can provide is not only much more compelling, but what you didn't hear in the video is that behind the scenes, we're also getting much more data about how consumers are engaging with the content that they're producing, but also the adverts and the rich video that they're producing as part of these interactive publications. So those were my 3 points around how we can, as marketers and as brands, look to move beyond the kind of digital distress that is caused by the way in which marketing is changing so rapidly. At Adobe, I often talk about this up front, because some people will say, well, why is Adobe talking to me at a digital marketing conference? Hopefully most of you are familiar with the marketing technology that we have, but we also have obviously the creative side, and it's not just about bugging you to update your PDF reader or Flash every 30 seconds. So as an organization, what we're doing is we're combining the rich kind of creative heritage that we have with the underlying technology to enable you to, as a brand, to understand how those experiences are performing, how your marketing is actually performing. And the idea being that we are providing a kind of an end-to-end experience here where you can make, manage, but now also measure and monetize those experiences that you're putting in front of people. So I just want to leave you with these kind of 3 points. Certainly what we're seeing when we're talking to marketers is that marketing needs some form of reinvention in order to meet the demands of the new consumer, which we must also remember that we are the new consumer as well as the marketer who's trying to reach them. Understanding some of those digital trends means that we should be able to move beyond seeing these things necessarily as a challenge and much more as an opportunity. And there are increasingly digital marketing technology providers out there who can give you that competitive differentiation. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. And I think we're now going to move on to roundtable discussion. We haven't rehearsed this, but I think on your tables you all should have the first piece. You'll unfortunately see my smiling mug on the top one with a question about the digital distress. Maybe I should, are you going to? No? Okay, cool, all right. So I can't remember what the exact question was, but it relates back to the digital distress research that we carried out, where we asked marketers, how do you feel about marketing now? How do you feel that it's changed over the last few years? But also, what are the kind of barriers that you see, both personally and also within the organization, to actually alleviating that digital distress and really taking control of the experience for your consumers?